Welcome to We the Plaintiffs, a podcast built specifically for law students destined for the plaintiff's bar and the courtroom. My name is Corbin Winward. I am a rising 3L law student where I currently serve as the president of my school's Plaintiffs Law Association. Today we're talking about one of the most important emerging areas in plaintiff side litigation, social media addiction and child safety. My guest today is Nicki Petrossi, host of the podcast Scrolling to Death. Nicki spent 15 years running a social media marketing business before turning her attention to the harms these platforms can cause, especially for children. Nicki's organization is so much more than just a podcast. Last year, Nicki and her team made three major moves. First, they founded the Tech Safe Learning Coalition, or TLC, to support parents who are worried about school-issued devices. Her team also officially launched the nonprofit arm of their work called S2D Foundation. And finally, the Scroll to Death team launched The Heat is On, an investigative miniseries. And Nicki was present for the landmark trial against Meta and YouTube involving a young woman who alleged that addictive platform design features contributed to anxiety, depression, body dysmorphia, and suicidal thoughts. Nicki took over 500 pages of notes during the trial, and today we're going inside the courtroom to talk about what the jury heard, what evidence mattered, and what plaintiff lawyers should take from the verdict. Thanks for joining us, Nicki.
Thank you for having me, Corbin.
Yeah. So, like I said, you spent 15 years running a successful social media marketing business before launching Scrolling to Death. So what changed for you?
I think the biggest thing was having kids. I have 3 kids now. They're 10, 9, and 5. And, when they were little, parents typically, especially a few years ago, were just posting their kids all over the internet, not thinking about it. That was the norm. And as they got a little bit older, I started to feel really uncomfortable doing that. And so started to do some research into the risks of sharing our children online. I think also through 2020 and COVID, everyone was spending a lot more time scrolling on social media and comparing themselves and what the activities they were setting up for their kids. Just the mom guilt around that time was getting really heavy. And I was noticing the source of that was social media. And so I started to do more research at that time and kind of led me to find out that there wasn't a lot of resources for parents around social media safety and that there was a need for that.
Yeah. Can you kind of explain what those other projects are, the Tech Safe Learning Coalition and the miniseries?
Sure. So Tech Safe Learning Coalition came to life after I started to struggle with my kids' use of iPads given by their school. I was unhappy with the amount of time that they were spending on there. And this was in like 1st and 2nd grade. I thought, why do they even have these? And so I started to engage with the school and ask questions. I started to go into their classroom and check the iPads to see what they were able to access. And one day I went on YouTube on my daughter's, she was in 3rd grade at that time, on her iPad in class. And they had access to YouTube Shorts, the short form video feed. And within a minute or two got served a self-harm video, like a video telling her that cutting herself is easy. Wow. And so that pissed me off, obviously. And I had already been kind of exploring this topic with experts on the podcast, Scrolling to Death. And I realized that parents, I shared that experience about finding that video online and realized that parents everywhere were concerned about these same things at school. And so I thought there's a need for an area that has a lot of resources and templates that parents can use to start those conversations with their school. And so that became techsafelearning.org.
That's great. So it's even worse than people think. It's not just affecting their brains and development and learning. It's actual self-harm videos for little kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the threat of what they are getting access to through something that seems benign like social media. But what we've learned through the case we're going to talk about is that, these algorithms are geared and developed to keep kids on there longer. And that is done through triggering their fight or flight response, which means that this scary triggering content gets pushed in the algorithm, especially to young people. But, kids are accessing pornography, all kinds of things on those school-issued devices. Schools just don't have appropriate budgets to lock them down.
Yeah. And briefly, do you want to touch on the miniseries you're doing too?
Yeah. So I guess it was late last year. Well, a lot of lawsuits have been filed against social media companies by individuals, by states, by school districts. And the first big trial started in the end of January. And groups that I was working with were gearing up for it and realizing that this was going to be a big deal and that we should cover it really closely. And so I partnered with Heat Initiative, who's an advocacy group that puts direct pressure on tech companies to do better when it comes to kids' safety. And we developed this investigative mini-series focused on the first trial, which was KGM versus Meta and YouTube. It was originally versus Snapchat and TikTok as well, but they settled in just the days leading up to the trial. So the mini-series was focused on taking people through the trial experience from start to finish. And it's actually continuing on now that we have more trials coming.
Yeah. So was there anything else? It sounds like it was the first case. Was there anything else that drew you to this case specifically strong enough to sit through it? And I think you said take over 500 pages of notes.
Yeah, I think it was like 589 pages of notes.
Wow.
You know, I just knew, I'll say this. I had been working hard to try to get laws passed to protect kids online for the last couple of years. And we failed. Like, we have been failing and failing and failing because the social media companies spend tens of millions of dollars every year lobbying against those bills. They are in the Oval Office. They're meeting with senators. They're convincing them to put poison pills in the bill so that they're not actually protecting kids. I was feeling really burned out on trying to get legislation. And I think that lawsuits are going to force change more quickly than the legislation is. And they can work hand in hand, and they are. But I realized that this lawsuit, particularly being that it's the first one in a long line of these social media addiction suits, was going to be really important. And that Kaley's story was so common to a lot of the parent survivors who've lost children to social media harms. Their stories were very alike. And so I thought this story needed to be amplified.
Yeah. And for listeners who haven't followed it closely, who was KGM or Kaley, and what was the heart of her claim against Meta and YouTube?
Yeah, so Kaley is a now 20-year-old young woman living in Oakland, California. She started using YouTube at 6 years old and Instagram at 9 years old. And she developed some severe mental health issues, anxiety, depression, body dysmorphia, suicidal ideation, eating disorder issues, and all kinds of things. And what was being alleged is that the design and operation of the platforms and the functions that they created played a substantial role in causing those mental health harms. And not that it was the only thing that caused it, but that it played a substantial role. And so Kaley was very brave in being the first one up to bat to take on these companies. And it really was an incredible experience.
Yeah, I bet. It was a few weeks of a trial, right?
Yeah, I think it was January 27th, maybe to March 20-something was the verdict, around there. So about 2 months.
Wow. And from the courtroom perspective, what to you made this case feel different from just an ordinary civil trial?
So funny enough, I've never sat in on a trial before. And so I don't know what would be different about it necessarily. But what I've heard is that, like I mentioned before, this story, Kaley's story, felt like everybody's story. Me and other advocacy groups were able to gather a bunch of parents who supported Kaley, and then also parent survivors who I mentioned, people who have lost children to social media harms, a lot of which have also filed lawsuits against the social media companies. They showed up, and they showed up to the trial, and they were inside the courthouse. They were outside the courthouse. We had vigils for their children. We had press conferences. We showed their faces, let them talk to press, because this is such a massive problem. And anyone that I talked to throughout the experience, anyone, especially parents, were like, of course it's addictive. Of course, Kaley should win. And so it felt like it was all of us versus these companies. And I think that's what was different, is everyone could relate to her experience.
Yeah, us parents know it's addictive because we started with it and we're addicted to it too. So
totally.
Yeah. So I guess from your perspective, did this trial feel more like a story about child safety, addiction, corporate knowledge, or was there some other theme that kind of stood out?
I think it was a balance of all of those. I think the main trial attorney, Mark Lanier, and his team did a really good job of explaining the brain science behind these products and showing the internal documents where the companies are studying young people's brains and figuring out how to wire for habitual use or addiction. I mean, they call it addiction in their internal documents. They were very clear in showing that the plaintiff team was very clear in showing the child safety features and the failure of those safety features and parental controls that the companies rolled out, and that they waited a really long time to roll anything out. In fact, Kaley started using this so many years ago. None of the things were in place to protect Kaley. So it really felt like a well-balanced lesson. I mean, sometimes, some days I felt like I was in a master class or a college course learning about addiction science and brain science and how algorithms work. And I think that that's a testament to the plaintiff attorneys team and the experts that they brought in to really get the jury to understand how these platforms work, how they're wired for addiction, how these companies knew it, and then move forward anyways.
Yeah, I'm just researching this case more after attending the Linear Academy, but my understanding was they specifically used the big tobacco techniques and the slot machine techniques and just everything they could make addicting about it, they did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, they understood how to give people, users, anybody, us, dopamine hits, right? They were studying dopamine and studying brain science in order to add functionality that would get people coming back. Even as simple as the like button or or your push notification, right? Obviously, that's bringing you back in. All of these seemingly simple functions that we just are used to using and seeing were added on purpose to get us to not be able to stop using it. And that is really harmful, especially to young people.
Yeah. And remind me, did Kaley herself testify?
Yes, she did.
Okay. What was the most powerful part of her testimony, you think?
I think seeing Kaley up there and hearing how she still struggles, even knowing what these companies have done to her brain and to her and taking on this lawsuit, she's still addicted to social media. She said things like social media has consumed every single day of my life, almost all day long. One of the stats that was pulled about her account is one day she used Instagram 16 hours in one day. There's one interaction between Kaley and Mark Lanier, her attorney, where Mark said, "Who was your best friend when you were a kid?" And Kaley said, "My phone." And then he said, "Before your phone, who was your best friend?" And she said, "My sister." And so just the devastating moments of realizing what it took away from her. And that it was pointed out during her testimony that even on the lunch break, while she was on break, she was still scrolling on social media. Like, it still affects her to this day. One more thing that she shared was that, it takes her 3 to 4 hours to get ready in the morning to get out the door. Her self-image is just destroyed. And so just seeing the reality of that in a 20-year-old girl who's going to deal with this for the rest of their life was really hard.
Yeah. And she wouldn't post any photos that weren't filtered, right?
Yeah. Yeah, she used, I think, almost always used filters. I don't think they said always, but tens of thousands of posts over the years with filters. And then imagine going out into the world and facing the world without those filters on it. It just, anyone is going to be affected by that.
Yeah. 16-hour span of use one time. And then I think I remember from the academy, sometimes at school, she would check 10 times per school day. So that's multiple times per class, starts to affect everything.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Was there a moment during the case where you thought, the jury is really hearing this, they're understanding?
The Lanier team, a couple of times during the trial, showed a letter that Kaley wrote to her mom. I think it was around her 9th birthday, and it was like 9 reasons I love my mom or something. And then she read them, or Mark read them out loud, and that got the jury teared up for sure. Like, just seeing the difference in the mom's relationship with her daughter pre-social media and then post-social media. That was really effective, just showing the mother-daughter relationship. I would also say there was some really tense interactions between the defense and the plaintiffs that really piqued the jury's interest. There was one interaction around YouTube, and YouTube claimed that Kaley deleted her data prior to 2020, so they weren't able to share it during the trial. And their witness, Ian McMeans, testified to that. And then if you find out, Mark Lanier comes up on the cross and is like, well, it says in your fine print that YouTube deletes watch history after they reach a storage limit of 80,000 views per user. And so turns out, once you get in the fine print, that YouTube actually deleted Kaley's data, even though they claimed, and it was just something that Louis Lee, the YouTube attorney, I don't think anybody realized it. And Mark Lanier just happened to catch it. And so that was the back and forth on that was really intense. And some of those moments where we kind of caught them in a flub was super effective for the jury.
Yeah. Was there, I think you mentioned a few pretty damning things that they found, but was there any other like internal document or piece of evidence that seemed to have the most emotional or practical impact for the jury?
It's hard to say one or two because there was so much, like when you think of it all together. And actually, one of the law firms is working on publishing a website with all of the evidence. And that should be available in the next week or two, actually. But
great. Yeah.
Yeah. So keep an eye out. I'm interviewing an attorney right after this about that website.
I'd love to put it in the show notes once it's available.
Yeah. So that interview will be with Previn Warren of Motley Rice. So I'll have a link to the website and the episode notes for that. But I would say that, a lot of attention's on Meta and Instagram, but I was more shocked, and I think the jury was too, with the YouTube evidence. There was so many call outs to addiction. There was internal documents that said that their goal is not viewership, it's addiction. They said things like, our vision is to create a product that is addictive. Like, they just straight up admit it in these older documents. And obviously over time, you can see they stop using addiction and start using problematic use. And that's very purposeful. But, I encourage people, even if you're not in law, to review the documents for yourself, because it is shocking, damning. It'll change the way you approach these technologies in your own life.
Yeah, maybe it'll help me stop doom scrolling at night when I'm supposed to be sleeping.
Totally. Exactly. Yeah.
The case focused a lot on features like algorithmic recommendations, the filters we talked about, push notifications, autoplay, infinite scroll. Is there one of these, if it's possible to narrow down to one, that felt the most important to talk about?
Gosh, I mean, there was important moments for all of those. I would say there was a lot of talk about the beauty filters, because there was internal emails between Mark Zuckerberg and Adam Mosseri, the head of Instagram, and their team, where they were discussing whether or not to ban plastic surgery filters. So filters that can make your nose smaller, make your lips bigger, that could mimic plastic surgery. And there was team members showing concern or expressing concern that would be harmful. There was even researchers who were expressing concern that there's research that would be harmful. And still, Mark Zuckerberg decided to allow the filters.
Wow.
They made some concession, like they weren't going to push them out, but they would let people create them and use them if they wanted. And so just Mark Zuckerberg prioritizing like free expression over safety when there is clear evidence that would be harmful and shown to be harmful, and how Kaley interacts with the world now as an effect or after using those filters for so many years. So I would give that example. Also, just infinite scroll and like the discussion around YouTube had the opportunity to remove autoplay to remove autoplay for minors at nighttime. There was a discussion around that, that it was leading to a lot of kids to stay up all late at night. There was a huge spike in usage at night in young kids because of the autoplay feature, and they knew that, and they decided to leave that feature there. So there was a lot of examples where they had a decision point. They could have made the safer choice and disabled a feature, and they chose not to.
Wow. Yeah, if it means more money for them, then why would they change it?
Right. Exactly. That's all I care about.
What was it like watching Mark Zuckerberg, testify in person, I think for 8 hours?
Yeah, it was crazy. First of all, he was way shorter than I thought. I don't know. That was like my first impression was like, whoa, he's very short. Yeah. You just imagine these big, famous people to be tall. I don't know. Yeah. A few things stood out to me. He was very well practiced and prepared. He did a lot of stalling. They have to flip through the binder to find an exhibit, and he would just stall and stall and stall.
Yeah.
And his attorney did a lot of objecting. Just, again, I feel like it was a stalling tactic. Yeah. He had his go-to statements that he would make, like, I disagree with that characterization, like just things that he would go to. You could tell just that he had practiced a ton.
Yeah.
I noticed something small but important to me, that Mark Zuckerberg never said the word child or kid. He always said person under 13. It was very odd to me because they're talking about kids the whole time and kid users and child users and minors. He never said any of those words. He always said person under 13. And I'm sure that was, he sort of was dehumanizing the experience and referring to this group of people like they were just a group of users that he has to deal with.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about a real human being. And so that really stood out to me, like he's on a different level and doesn't have to worry about individuals like Kaley. But in the end, Kaley won, and he's got to deal with the ramifications of his actions and his decisions. And I think the pressure will only continue to grow.
So the CEO of Instagram, Adam Mosseri, what about his testimony stood out to you?
Yeah, so he's very tall in opposition to Mark Zuckerberg. But again, he was very well practiced. He was getting a little frustrated after a while, a little argumentative. I know that day a lot of parent survivors made it into the courtroom. There was a lottery system, and so that stood out to me a lot. Like he was sitting and having to look at all of these parents who his decisions literally played a role in them losing their children. That was very, very powerful, very sad, very tense for everybody. I think what stands out to me is that in a previous interview that Adam Mosseri did, he said very clearly, I think there is such a thing as being addicted to a social media platform. And so Mark Lanier obviously brought that up, and Adam Mosseri stated that he misspoke and he should have said problematic use. But it's like, there it is. You said it, you meant it. Just because you're trying to erase that word from history and replace it with a different word, we're not falling for it. So, I think one other thing that stood out to me, and this was something that he was probably advised upon, but certain studies that were brought up by Mark Lanier, like there's a MIST study, MYST, that was really important that Meta did and then never released, that showed basically harm to kids that they just didn't let anyone know about. But Adam Mosseri would say, I don't remember the details of the study. He would claim to not know about these really, really important aspects of the trial and his business, I think with the intention of maybe not being able to be asked about it if he could claim that he hadn't seen it. But there was a lot of moments where I feel like his testimony fell flat, and it was clear that he was just saying his talking points that he was trained to say and trying to get out of there as quick as possible.
Yeah. So I know that the defense argued a lot that life circumstances and how Kaley had some problems previous to using the platforms. Did that ever connect with the jury?
So the defense's whole approach was to amp up and point out all of the other non-social media issues that Kaley experienced. And I thought that was so interesting because Mark Lanier and the plaintiffs weren't saying that there weren't other issues. We all acknowledged that there were other issues going on for Kaley, but all that the plaintiffs needed to prove was that social media was one of the substantial issues, but it's okay that there were others. And so I didn't feel like the defense I don't feel like the defense did a good job or really much of a job proving that social media wasn't a factor. They focused on amplifying all those other factors. And they did a good job of that. They made it seem like Kaley's life was hard other than social media. And again, that's okay. But what the Laniers did really well and effectively was make it very, very clear that social media was also a factor. So I found myself many times through the trial being like, why isn't the defense going harder on trying to disprove that social media was a factor? And they just couldn't because there wasn't evidence to support that.
Were there ever moments that you're like, that's a good point for the defense? Like, I think that's effective, or was it all kind of just flat?
I mean, we saw thousands of medical records during the trial of Kaley had a lot of therapy sessions throughout her youth. And they pointed out how few times social media was mentioned. And it wasn't there. Like, it really wasn't there a ton. But I think when you think back, during that time, 10 plus years ago, and even now, like I think therapists are finally becoming aware that social media plays such an important role in kids' mental health and their issues that they may experience. But back then, it wasn't something that therapists knew to ask about, were trained on. It's still, social media addiction is still not even in the DSM-5, the diagnostic manual that they work from. And so it wasn't in their training to ask about it. And so when you think of it that way, it's not that it wasn't an issue, it's just that the therapists weren't prepared to tackle it.
So you're a reporter, Nicki. What do you think the public reporting on this case still misses?
I think that a lot of the media outlets were there for Zuckerberg, the big days, the big headlines. And what I was there for was the bigger story. And I want parents to look at Kaley and be like, that could easily be my child if I don't do something, because it's going to take all of us pushing back on these companies to make a difference and to get them to change their ways, whether through regulation, legislation, lawsuits, all of these pressure points. And so I think a few outlets were there a lot and they did a decent job, but I kind of came in with like the eye of the parent and trying to break down the experience in a way that really matters for parents who are following along.
Yeah. I've told you before, Nicki, I'm a parent. I have a little 1-year-old boy. So I'm personally invested in this case and in the work you do. And thank you again for everything you do.
Thank you.
After sitting through so much of that trial, weeks, months, what do you think parents most need to understand about all this?
What I think about a lot is we can't trust the social media companies or even tech companies in general, AI companies, educational technology companies. They're there to make money. They're there for their stock price.
Yeah.
We just can't take them at their word, because every single time they say something great about what their product does regarding safety, it gets tested by myself or a group that I'm working with or anyone legitimate, and it doesn't work, or it falls flat, or it doesn't do what it says it's going to do. And so I've just lost faith in believing them and taking them at their word. And I would encourage parents, obviously delay these technologies as long as you can, but before you give access to anything tech, you have to try it yourself as a child, not just for 5 minutes. So you can experience what it's going to be like for your kid. You can understand what they're going to be dealing with, so you can advise them. And I just think that's so important. And honestly, 9 times out of 10, you're going to have an experience on a platform you think might be good for kids. And you're going to be like, never mind. Like, this is not what I want my kids spending their time doing. And so I think parents just need to raise the bar and the standards of what we allow our kids to use.
Yeah, that reminds me, I was listening to a podcast, and this guy said he spent $1 million a year on security, a lot of guards and whatever. And his son would play Roblox.
Nope.
And he got a call late at night, and then the call dropped, and he found out his son had been communicating with this man on Roblox, and he was trying to call his son. And he's like, I spend this so much on security, but now people are getting in digitally. So I mean, the platforms, the video games, it's all scary stuff.
And it's like, we can't see who these people are. Like, your kid thinks it's another kid that they're playing with on Roblox, because everyone's a cartoon character online or on Snapchat or all these platforms, the gaming platforms. And so our kids are very easily fooled. We can't just say, not my kid, they're going to know better. No, like, they're going to be tricked like any other kid, even mine. And so, yeah, it's about securing the digital spaces that your kids have access to, just as you would their physical spaces.
Yeah. Well, just one last question. I watch a lot of your content and your advice for parents and everything. And I just want to pass along any maybe 1 or 2 nuggets you would give to everyone. Obviously, they should go watch your other stuff. But what advice would you give for parents overall for keeping kids safe in this age? Oh
my gosh. I mean, most importantly is conversations. Even if you restrict all devices in your home, which I encourage you to try to do, to narrow it down as much as possible, they are going to get access to something, whether it's a friend's device, they'll find an old iPad in the drawer, they'll use their school issued device to get access to things that, you might not want them seeing earlier than you want them to see it. And so as you learn more about online harms, whether it be any type of bad content, bad people, talking to your kid about it. What do you know about AI chatbots? Have you heard about pornography? Have you heard the word pornography before? And there's lots of resources that I talk about all over the podcast that you can use to help you have those conversations, because I get it's really, really tricky. But that's my goal, is to help parents have those conversations very earlier than you think, because there are age-appropriate ways to do that. So I would say, in addition to delaying addictive technologies out of childhood, using child-safe devices when you do decide to give your kid a device like the Bark Watch or the Bark Phone. Those are really good options for a completely parent-controlled device. as opposed to Apple devices, all
Yeah.
of that. But what it really comes down to is the relationship with your kids, having those open conversations. And when they do make a mistake, because that's okay, kids do that, not getting mad at them, encouraging them to come to you, and you'll be their safe space so that they'll continue to do that.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. And thank you so much for joining today.
Yeah. Thank you, Corbin. This was fun.
Yeah.